Yes, believe it or not, that's actually Herman and Sharron.
Yeah, we were a lot younger back then, weren't we?
Married in Buffalo, New York in 1959. You are about to see part one. We renewed our vows in 1991.
32 years we've been married.
And the reason I want you to see this, Dr. Larry Freeman, our pastor at that time, this is one of the best marriage seminars that you could ever hear. Listen carefully to what he says. Oh, by the way, the wedding gown that Sharron is wearing in the 1991 renewal.
It's the original.
It's the original.
That's right.
She could get into it after 32 years. Watch, enjoy. God bless.
We welcome you to Pinellas Park Wesleyan Church. My name is Larry Freeman, and I pastor this local church. We are thrilled to be Herman and Sharron Bailey's pastor, and we welcome you to this special Action 60s program. Tonight we're going to be dealing with marriage. The theme would be partners for life. What does it mean to be a partner with a man or a woman, a husband or a wife for life? As a local church pastor, I have been absolutely amazed at times to watch marriages. In the old building, when we had a very small crowd and you got to know everybody very intimately, I walked by the back row of the church every Sunday morning, and there I met a couple named Jack and Kirsten Wexel. They had been in America from Holland for about 50 years, but they sounded just like they got off of the boat. Because every Sunday I would go by and I would say, "Jack, how are you doing?" And he would be sitting there holding the hand of Kirsten. Now, Kirsten was about that high and weighed about 80 pounds soaking wet with a wet overcoat on. She looked like that she was just about to pass away from malnutrition. She was so small, wrinkled. And could I use a word that might not fit here? Ugly. But every time I would go by them on Sunday, he would be rubbing her hand, and he would look at me and he would say, "Pastor, isn't she beautiful?" And I would look at her, and in fact, I almost wanted to say, "No." But I would look at her and try to see through his eyes. Because I would say, "Jack, how long have you been married?" And he said, "Oh, we've been married 67 years. 67 years. I hope I live to be 67. But here they were sitting in church holding hands. Teenagers think they have a corner on that market. But they were holding hands and they would look at each other with such a love and compassion. I would say to them, "Give me some of the secrets of your marriage success. How have you been partners for life?" And they would say, "Well, back in the old country when we got married, we made up our mind we would never argue in the house. That when we argue, we would go outside in front of the neighbors and argue." And they said, "You know, we have very few arguments in our marriage." Pretty good advice, partners for life. But then they would say this, "The greatest asset of our marriage has been that it has been a relationship between Jack and Kirsten and God." That's what's made our marriage different. I watched that couple. About a year later, Jack would die. He would die and slip off to be with the Lord, and it was only a matter of weeks that a well, healthy Kirsten became sick, and she died. Why? After 68 years and a few months, partners for life, part of her life was gone. What makes a marriage like that? In an age and a day that we live, that we certainly do not see a lot of that going on. I have couples come into the office every day here at the church, and they'll come in and they'll say something like this, "We want to get married." And I'll say, "Okay, let's talk for a moment. How long have y'all known each other?" "Well, we met Friday night." And I'll say, "Well, what do you have in common?" And one of them looked at me, true story, and said, "We both like to roller skate." And I thought to myself, I said, "Now, what happens when you can't roller skate anymore?" This very day, in preparation for this great occasion today, this very day, I had a couple come in and they said, "We want to get married." And I said, "When?" They said, 2 weeks from now. So let's talk about that. Let's think about it. What makes a partner for life? See, this evening we are going to celebrate 32 years of a marriage. Herman and Sharron Bailey, 32 years ago, were united in marriage, and here they are, 32 years later, and you can see in their very life that God has done something very special in their life. Not that they haven't gone through hard times, not that they haven't gone through low places, but somewhere along the line they have continually made up their mind and reaffirmed we are going to be partners for life. One night as a young pastor, I was asked to go to a nursing home. The nursing home was some 25 miles away from my little country church. I pastored out in the woods in North Carolina. I mean, any direction you went was toward town. I mean it. We were way out in the woods. And they said, well, there's a little couple over in the nursing home in the city. Would you go see them? And so I got my little Volkswagen. I went down across the country roads and cut across and went to the big city of Greensboro, North Carolina. I went into this nursing home. It was raining. It was just pouring down the driving rain. It was lightning outside, and I asked for this couple. They had been placed, even both of them in the nursing home, they had been placed in the same room. I went down the hall late at night. I pushed back the door, and I observed a very intimate scene that I just felt like I had intruded in the night. In two separate single beds, they had extended their hands as far as they could, and their index fingers were grasping one another in the middle of the night. That is love. Love exhibited to its very nth degree. You know what I did? I closed the door, and I went outside, and I waited for a while. I sent a nurse down, and finally they invited me in. 56 years this couple have been married. 56 years and become very infirmed and could not live other than having just normal care every day given to them. But they had decided somewhere they were going to be a partner for life. Just the other night, I got a call from one of the people here in this church. She said to me, Pastor Larry, this is Eloise. George has just passed away at the hospital. Will you meet me there? So I got up and put my clothes on and drove through the night to the local hospital. And as I was coming in one corridor, I saw little Eloise Carpenter coming down the hall. And I said, Eloise, what room is George in? She said, he's down here. And we walked to the room. She opened the door, and there laid the lifeless form of her husband. I observed something that evening that it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I almost felt like saying, oh, forgive me, I should not be here. But I stood back in the shadows of that room, and I watched the most beautiful thing. She walked over to him, and she stroked the top of his head, and she kissed his forehead, and she said, George, you've been a good husband. We've had 54 wonderful years. You've been a good father. And for the next 15 minutes, she recounted little things. Do you remember, she said, and she accounted a certain thing that had happened. Do you remember when our son was born? And then she even went into, do you remember when he was 44 years old, he died? George, you've been a good husband. And then she took her hand and she stroked his hair back, and she reached over and kissed him on the lips and said, I'll see you in heaven. They were partners for life. What makes a partner for life? Well, the Bible starts in the very beginning. It starts back in the book of Genesis, and it talks about the fact that a man shall leave his father and mother and shall take unto him a wife, and the two shall become one. First time this occurs in the Scripture. If we could go through the Heavens Hall of Fame and look at marriages and look at homes and look at these biblical characters, we will see that these people had a tremendous amount of problems. Last Sunday was Mother's Day, and we talked about Elkanah and Hannah, the parents of Samuel. They had prayed and prayed and prayed God would give them a child. And then when that child came, They just gave him to the Lord the way they said they would do. They had had problems. They had lived a long period of time. We can go through these biblical characters and know that partners for life does not mean that we will not have any problems. Partners for life does not mean that there will not be low places. There has to be a lot of I'm sorries. Will you forgive me? I love you. You smell good. You look good. I just want to squeeze you. You say, what do you mean? I know that's not deep theological thinking, and the Greek can't hardly handle that. But I'm saying some practical things that means to me that a partner for life is something that you are going to be seen exhibited in this renewal tonight. Let's talk about marriage just for a moment and how that comes about. How does this partnership for life come about? Well, in just a moment, the music's going to start. Let me tell you what to watch for. The groom and his best man will come in from this side. Why do they come in first? It indicates that he is the initiator of what's about to happen here this evening. Somewhere he is the one who said, Sharon, will you marry me? He comes in. In just a few moments, then you will see her attendants come down the aisle, and then you will see her enter the room. The music changes. This evening, for this particular purpose, she will be on the arm of her son. Normally, the bride is on the arm of the father. What does that signify? A father twofold. First of all, he, by bringing her in, is saying, I approve of who this man is. The second thing is he is saying, up to this point, I have fulfilled my responsibility, and now she's yours. Then you're going to see things like this, a first set of vows. Let's go over that first set of vows. That first set of vows is dealing with vows to God, to witnesses, and to the pastor. If these vows were properly taken, they would be taken at the door of the sanctuary. Because what it says is, this is our intent for coming tonight. We intend to do this. This is our motive. This is the motivation behind it. And when those vows are taken at the base of these steps, it indicates that our motives are now clear. He has initiated this. She has responded. The one that is giving her away is actually handing over the responsibility, and that is taken care of. The music will start and we'll move up here. What does this signify? This signifies moving into the altar area. This signifies moving into the presence of God. If you went into the Old Testament, you would find that there was much movement within the houses of God and houses of worship. Some things happened outside of the gate. Some things happened at the gate. Some things happened inside of the gate. Some things happened in the holy place. Some things happened in the Holy of Holies. Well, when this bride and groom walks up the steps and they come to right here, it is actually signifying that they're walking into the presence of God. A partnership for life is a covenant. It is not a contract. It's covenant. And a covenant is between three people. A covenant is between husband, wife, and God. A contract is between two people. A covenant is based on trust. We trust each other. We trust God. A contract is based on mistrust. You say, what do you mean? Go buy a car. Tell them down at your local bank, you can trust me. I don't have to sign any papers. I'll make the payments every month. And they'll say, sign here. Now, they're not saying sign here because they trust you. They say sign here because they don't trust you. And they want your word on the dotted line that you're going to do that. Marriage is more than just, yeah, it is. The world today says, oh, it's more than a piece of paper. You got it. But that's part of it. And so marriage is a covenant relationship. All right, when they come here, it becomes three. There is a bride, a groom, and God. The vows that are taken here are to God, to the witnesses, that's you, and to me. The vows that are taken back here are the vows to each other. Then they will signify these vows by the exchanging of a ring. Boy, this is the loudest little thing you've ever heard in your life. When you put that on your finger and you walk down the street or you go to work, it says real loudly, I'm a married man or I'm a married woman. I have a husband, I have a wife, I have somebody I've taken vows with, somebody I want to spend the rest of my life with. It signifies several things. First of all, it signifies no beginning and no end, says that this is until death us do part. It is made of very precious metal. It signifies the vows that you take to love and to cherish. It also, on your finger, says real loud to someone, I'm speaking for somebody else. Now, see, when I wear this, I have a wife. She's sitting right down there on that second row. We've been married 30 years, and I love her more today than I did 30 years ago. But it says when you see this, I have a wife. I have somebody that I love. I can speak for. You remember the prodigal son? The prodigal son runs away and spends everything, and he thinks, I'm going to go home to Dad, and Dad won't have anything to do with me anymore, and I won't be worthy, and he starts coming back. You know that story. When he starts back, you ever read this part? It says, I see my son coming. That's Dad talking. Go kill the fatted calf, call in the neighbors, let's have a party. Then he says this, put a robe on his back, put shoes on his feet, and it says put a ring on his finger. What's that ring for? It was a signet ring. He now had the authority to speak for the family. And that's exactly what that ring stands for. You have the authority to now, as one, speak for one another. When it comes to this thing of partners for life, I want you to understand that we don't know how long that's going to be. But before God, if it is like 67 years, or if it's like a few moments. See, in North Carolina, I had a wedding years ago. I was involved with a wedding that was so special. 18-year-old marrying a 19-year-old. Church is decorated. Everything is wonderful. Everything was beautiful. Couple stood at the front, took the vows. And then it was said, by the authority invested in me as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ and by the state of North Carolina, I pronounce you a husband and wife. Da, 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 da. They went out the aisle. Everybody threw rice. They got in the car, pulled out. Groom paid no attention to traffic. Hit by a truck. Both killed instantly. Less than an hour. I don't know if it's less than an hour or if it's 67 years. These vows are not just to each other. They're to God and to each other. You see, I stand on this platform. This is sort of my home. And I stand on this platform week after week marrying couples. Oh, I think it's absolutely wonderful. First of all, I notice that more grooms cry than brides. Now, I don't know if you know that or not, but that's a true statistic from I'll say to the groom, would you repeat after me? And he says, all right, Bill, take the, and it just and the bride seemed to be a little bit more together. I don't know why it is. But my favorite part is when I get to the end, we've gone through the vows. We've exchanged the rings. We've done all of those things. And then I say to them this, inasmuch as you've consented today in holy wedlock, and you've witnessed the same before God and the witnesses and the pastor. You've taken vows to one another. You've exchanged rings. By the authority invested in me as a minister, and I start seeing in them a well of emotion coming up. They're standing side by side looking at me, but they don't see me. They're looking out of their peripheral vision, man. They're just trying to see what she's going to look like or what he's going to look like. I say, by the authority invested in me. As a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, by the state of Florida, you're a husband and wife together. And those whom God joins together, let not man put asunder. Then I look at that. I can't wait for this moment. This is the prize moment. I look at that groom and I say, you may kiss your wife. Now, not long ago I said that, and he turned, and his bride, who was 6 inches taller than he was, picked him up off of the floor and kissed him passionately. And I almost had to say break and go to your neutral corners, but she put him down, and they went out of here together. Most of the time, that is a moment that says what? We have now set out on a journey to be partners for life. Now, this evening, if you're married and you're sitting here with your husband or wife, or if your husband or wife is not able to come this evening, would you just simply place yourself into the shoes of Herman and Sharron? Last Saturday night at a couples retreat, I had the joy of having 58 couples standing around the room at a retreat center. We had been talking for 2 days on marriage, and then as they renewed their wedding vows, I've never seen so many tears. I mean, we just thought we'd all decorate our cars and put cans on the back and drive back to the church. I mean, it was neat this evening where you're sitting. Would you think about your husband, your wife? If you're here tonight and you might be single, or if you're watching by television, you might be single. Maybe you're divorced. And from this point on, you're going to have an impact on people's lives. Please understand that God's plan is one man and one woman forever. I want you to ask God to help we who carry the banner of Jesus Christ to live in such a way that this generation coming behind will see that there is such a thing as being a partner for life. Lord Jesus, bless now in the moments that is about to take place, and may we celebrate together partnership, husband, wife, God. Bless, we pray, Herman and Sharron, and may this be such a special time together for them and with their friends and family. In Jesus' precious name.
Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel His mighty power and His grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
May be seated. Dearly beloved, we've gathered in this place of worship, this church that Herman and Sharron called their home church, to reaffirm, recommit the marriage vows that Herman and Sharron made 32 years ago. It's with Jesus' joy that we come in this reaffirmation of marriage vows, and you have the same best man, the same maid of honor that you had 32 years ago. You, however, have added a daughter and a son and a grandson and others that are not up here. But we've entered this place of worship to reaffirm the marriage vows that you made 32 years ago. Marriage is an honorable estate. It was instituted by God in the time of man's innocency. It's not to be entered into unadvisedly, but reverently and discreetly and in the fear of God. The Bible says much about marriage. The book of Genesis for the first time says, man shall leave his father and mother and shall take unto him a wife, and the two shall become one. You go over into the center portion of the Old Testament and you find a book written by a father and a son, David and Solomon. And over in Psalms and Proverbs you hear father and mother and son and daughter and advice and admonition being given back and forth within the family unit. When you go to the beginning of the book, the New Testament, the first 4 books, the Gospels, Jesus performed his very first miracle, public miracle, at a wedding. It was in Cana of Galilee. It's where Jesus turned water into wine. Go over to the writings of Paul. Over and over, Paul talks about husband and wife. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Wives, love your husbands. It goes over and over. It talks about parents and children and provoking not their children. It's a tremendous set of books that Paul has written that he mentions marriage. But the highest analogy is given in the last book of the Bible, the book of Revelation, where we, the church, are called the bride, and Jesus is called the bridegroom. It even talks about a marriage supper of the Lamb. The analogy is given over and over. Talks about presenting the bride spotless and clean and pure. So with all the biblical references that we could go to and look at, marriage is not to be entered into unadvisedly, but reverently and discreetly and in the fear of God. The vows that you took 32 years ago, there's no more vows any more sacred than those vows. There's no more vows any more special than those vows. And as you have kept them for 32 years and established a marriage and a home and a family, we come to this point tonight where we are reaffirming those vows. If you will continue to steadfastly keep those vows, then the home that you established in 1959 and have maintained through these 32 years and find yourself in tonight, that home will continue to abide in the peace and the love of Jesus Christ. Herman, 32 years ago, there was a set of vows that went something like this, and I would like to come to you again and remind you of them and simply ask you to reaffirm those vows to Sharron. Herman, will you have Sharron to be your lawfully wedded wife, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love her, honor her, comfort and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, continue to keep yourself only unto her, as long as you both shall live?
I will.
Sharron, 32 years ago, you took a similar set of vows. You have steadfastly tried to keep those vows for 32 years. Tonight, we want to reaffirm those vows with you as you would reaffirm those to Herman. Sharron, will you have Herman to be your lawfully wedded husband, to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love him, honor him, comfort and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, continue to keep yourself only unto him as long as you both shall live?